84 waves in 27 days, not 84 missiles, not 84 drones, 84 distinct strike waves, each one designed to probe, exhaust, and overwhelm a defense architecture that the world was told was nearly impenetrable. Tel Aviv is being hit. Haifa is being hit. Apartment blocks in residential neighborhoods are absorbing impacts that Iron Dome and Arrow were built to prevent. The Bazan Refinery, one of Israel's most critical energy and military fuel nodes, is under renewed and sustained pressure. And Israeli civil defense authorities are confronting a problem that no amount of technological sophistication fully solves. When sirens sound dozens of times a day, the civilian population runs out of places to go, and the psychological cost of constant shelter rotations begins to compound in ways that military planners rarely model accurately. Iran is not simply firing missiles, it is executing a strategy. The distinction matters enormously, and it is a distinction that much of the Western media coverage of this conflict has been slow to make clearly. What is actually happening in the skies over Israel right now, and what does it tell us about where this war is heading? The analysis begins here. Ray McGovern spent 27 years inside the American intelligence apparatus, preparing the president's daily brief, chairing national intelligence estimates, and developing the analytical discipline that separates signal from noise in complex geopolitical environments. Since leaving government service, McGovern has applied that same discipline to conflicts that the mainstream analytical community has often preferred to view through ideological rather than strategic lenses. His consistent argument, documented across decades of public speeches, written commentary, and media appearances, is that honest assessment requires setting aside preferred conclusions and following the operational evidence wherever it leads. That framework is particularly relevant here, because what is unfolding between Iran and Israel is not, in McGovern's analytical tradition, a simple exchange of fire between two adversaries of unequal capability. It is something more structured, more deliberate, and if the operational pattern holds, more consequential than a single escalation event. Iran appears to have developed a theory of victory that does not require it to defeat Israel's military outright. It requires something considerably more achievable, making continued Israeli military operations economically and logistically unsustainable. That is a fundamentally different problem. McGovern's analytical framework consistently asks a question that operational commanders ask and that television coverage rarely does. What is the adversary trying to achieve? And is the current operation moving them toward that objective? Applied to Iran's strike pattern, the answer that emerges is uncomfortable. For those who have characterized these attacks as reactive or imprecise, 84 waves over 27 days is not randomness. It is a tempo, and tempo in military strategy is a tool. A sustained high-frequency strike tempo does several things simultaneously that a single large strike cannot accomplish. First, it saturates radar processing capacity. Every incoming track, whether missile, drone, or decoy, must be assessed, categorized, and assigned an intercept solution in real time. The more simultaneous tracks an air defense network is managing, the higher the probability that some percentage of threats slip through the seams between radar coverage zones. Second, it drains interceptor inventories at a rate that production cannot match. A dynamic this channel examined in detail in its previous analysis of the Arrow stockpile crisis. Each wave forces Israel to make real-time decisions about which threats to intercept with expensive long-range systems and which to allow lower-tier defenses to handle, or in some cases, which to accept will reach their targets. Third, and Perhaps most significantly, it reached shelter fatigue in the civilian population. McGovern has consistently pointed to civilian resilience or the erosion of it as an underrated factor in Western strategic analysis. When sirens sound continuously, when shelter protocols become a daily and nightly routine rather than an emergency measure, the psychological and the economic cost to a society compounds in ways that do not appear in military capability assessments, but absolutely appear in political pressure on governments to end conflicts on terms they might otherwise reject. The targeting of the Bazan refinery in Haifa is not incidental. It is in McGovern's analytical framework one of the clearest indicators that Iran is prosecuting a dual track campaign, simultaneously striking population centers that generate political pressure and targeting logistics infrastructure to constrain Israel's operational capacity. Bazan is Israel's largest oil refinery. It processes the majority of Israel's domestic fuel supply, including aviation fuel, critical to the operational tempo of the Israeli Air Force. Sustained pressure on that facility, even without a catastrophic strike that destroys it entirely, creates supply chain friction that accumulates over time. This mirrors a strategic logic that McGovern has documented in his analysis of asymmetric conflicts across the past 3 decades. The most effective infrastructure campaigns are not those that destroy a target in a single decisive strike, but those that force an adversary to divert resources, attention, and defensive capacity to protecting assets they cannot afford to lose. Israel cannot afford to lose Bazan. Iran knows this. And so the refinery becomes not just a target, it becomes a forcing mechanism, compelling Israeli defensive resources to distribute across a wider and wider set of protected sites simultaneously. Here is the question that McGovern's framework demands be asked directly. If Israel's air defense systems have intercepted the majority of Iranian projectiles across 84 ways, why are apartment blocks in Tel Aviv and Haifa being hit? The answer is not that the technology has failed. The answer is that the technology has failed. The answer is that the technology is being asked to do something it was not designed to do indefinitely. Operate at maximum capacity against maximum volume without meaningful recovery time between engagement cycles. Radar systems require recalibration. Interceptor batteries require resupply. Crews require rest. Decision support systems accumulate latency under sustained load. None of these are failures of Israeli engineering or Israeli military professionalism. They are physical constraints that apply to every defense system ever built. What Iran appears to have calculated and what McGovern's analytical tradition would identify as a sophisticated strategic insight is that the gaps in coverage do not need to be large to be consequential. A system operating at 95% effectiveness across 84 waves still produces mathematically a significant number of impacts. The cumulative effect of those impacts on infrastructure, on civilian confidence, on political sustainability is precisely what Iran is banking on. Behind every operational metric in this analysis, every intercept rate, every cost exchange ratio, every radar saturation calculation, there are human beings in shelters. McGovern's work has never been indifferent to that reality. His decades of public commentary on American foreign policy and its consequences have been driven at their core by a conviction that analytical clarity and moral seriousness are not opposite, that the most honest accounting of a conflict includes its cost in human terms, not just strategic ones. In northern Israel, communities near Haifa are managing the dual burden of aerial threat and the environmental hazard posed by a refinery complex under sustained attack. Petrochemical facilities struck by high explosive ordnance do not burn cleanly. The air quality, groundwater, and soil contamination risks in densely populated coastal areas are significant and will persist long after any ceasefire. In the wider region, the pattern of sustained bombardment on both sides of this conflict is compounding a humanitarian and ecological crisis that was already severe before this escalation began. McGovern has argued throughout his public life that the true cost of war is almost always higher than the initial accounting suggests. In this conflict, that argument is being demonstrated in real time. 84 waves, 27 days, Tel Aviv, Haifa, the Bazan refinery apartment blocks that were standing last week and are not standing today. The operational picture that emerges from this conflict, when analyzed through a cold, evidence-based lens that McGovern's intelligence tradition demands, is of an Iranian campaign that is more structured, more patient, and more strategically coherent than the frame of simple escalation captures. Israel's defense is capable, it is also finite, and Iran appears to have made a calculated judgment that finite defenses subjected to sustained attrition eventually reach their limits. Whether that judgment proves correct and what the consequences will be when it is tested further is a question that no amount of confident commentary can answer in advance. What can be said with confidence is this: the shape of this war is being determined not by a single decisive moment, but by the accumulation of 84 moments and counting. If this analysis gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening, consider sharing it with someone who is only seeing the surface.